Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. I get so many great suggestions from you all, and this is one of them. One of you wrote to me and said, hey, why don't you do a list of essential 20th century symphony cycles? That is, put your classical music into clumps. And I said to myself, oh my, that's really a great idea. It's a terrific idea because, first of all, the record industry, if you're buying physical product anyway, and even streaming, tends to package these things in clumps, and composers wrote them in clumps. So why not do classical clumps? It's fabulous. So here, for all of you clumpists, is a list of 12 essential 20th century symphony cycles. If you want one, you're going to want them all. Yes, you should just collect them and trade them and parcel them out. No, it's fabulous. You can get them all at once and listen to them and get to know the composers. And I think it's really, really cool. Now, these essential lists for beginners are closed lists, as I've said a million times. In other words, don't give me your suggestions for what you'd prefer to have on the list. They will be deleted. Do not give others. Just the list is the list. That's it. If you want to talk about the list, feel free. But nothing is being added. Nothing is being taken away. These are biblical. They are the word of God and not Cankrazans. I mean the real one. They stay the way they are for all time. Got it? All right, let's get to the list, shall we? So all you beginners out there, this is, I think, actually a handy exercise because it shows you who wrote what and how many of them that they wrote, so you know what to look for. Let's start at the beginning. Gustav Mahler. Yes, Mahler. He's terrific. One of the most popular composers in existence today. Now, some of you may say, well, he started in the 19th century. He did. But for our purposes, 20th century composers are those who wrote the majority of their symphonies in the 20th century. And that's certainly Mahler, because the first three were before, and the next pile of them were afterwards. Now, Mahler wrote 10 symphonies, more or less. There's an uncompleted 10th symphony, which is actually his 11th, because his song symphony, Das Lied von der Erde, is a symphony, but it is unnumbered. So I just put down 10 here, and just for handiness, because there are 10 numbered symphonies plus Das Lied von der Erde. You should know that. And once you do, you've got the Mahler symphonies. Now, no composer wrote symphonies that were as big and expansive and as different from one to the next as Mahler did. So it's really an adventure to get through Mahler. And the wonderful thing about Mahler, of course, is that if you have the symphonies, you basically have Mahler, because all there is, other than the symphonies, is a selection of arrangements he did of things by other composers, including his fake Weber opera Die Drei Pintos. There's 42 songs. And then there's the cantata, Das Klagende Lied, and just a handful of other tiny things. That's it. So get the symphonies, you've got the composer, and oh my goodness, what an adventure it is. So after Mahler, Albert Roussel, a great French composer. Many of you may not have heard of him, but he's a fantastic composer, and he wrote 4 symphonies. He was the great French symphonist from the first half of the 20th century. His 3rd symphony is the most popular. It was commissioned by the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Leonard Bernstein recorded it twice. It's pretty well known, and they're short. His later symphonies, 25 minutes, 20 minutes. They're not big things. They're very concise and very punchy rhythmically. His 2nd symphony, which is his biggest symphony in many respects, it's a bit longer, is one of the great 20th century symphonies. I mean, hands down, not an easy work. It's not difficult. It has tunes. It's beautifully scored, but it's a very serious work, incredibly serious work. It's magnificent and beautiful. So Roussel, major guy. Next, let's go to America. William Grant Still. Now, William Grant Still is one of the major African-American classical music composers. He wrote tons of music. He wrote operas, he wrote ballets, he wrote tone poems, and he wrote 5 very, very beautiful symphonies. His first, the Afro-American Symphony, was the most popular American symphony probably by anybody. And, the before 1950. It was played all over the place, and it's just terrific. Absolutely terrific. And the other four are in a similar style. If you like Gershwin, if you like the mixture of classical, jazz, Afro-American heritage, that sort of thing, you're going to like these pieces. They're very, very beautiful. And I put them on the Essentialist because, first of all, he's a major American composer that doesn't get much attention because Americans have such an inferiority complex when it comes to their own music, which is just ridiculous, but there it is. So they deserve to be played. Again, they're not long works. They're 20, 25 minutes each. They're very concise, tuneful, evocatively scored, beautiful pieces. And they've all been recorded, so you can find them easily enough. They're on Naxos, the whole series. And some of the others are on other recordings as well. And they're lovely, lovely, lovely pieces that deserve vastly more attention than they get. American symphonists are just not treated well by Americans. And if we don't do it, no one else will. So I'm making that correction. Next, in the UK, George Lloyd. George Lloyd, wonderful man. He wrote 12 gorgeous, romantic, luscious symphonies, all in the 20th century. His models were Berlioz, Tchaikovsky, and Verdi. Italian opera composers. So these are tuneful and gorgeous pieces. I played in the world premiere, actually, of the Fifth Symphony, which I arranged in New York. And you're going to love these pieces. You're really, really going to love them. They're beautiful works, if you can find them still. I think some of them may be in limbo discographically, but you can get some of them. Anyway, Prokofiev. Well, we all know Prokofiev. He wrote 7 symphonies of wildly differing quality and accessibility, I would say. Number 1 is the classical symphony. It's incredibly popular and perky and humorous. Number 2 is an experimental piece based on lots of screaming dissonance and violence and nastiness and steel and ice, or whatever he said about it. Number 3 is based on his opera, The Fiery Angel, and it's horror movie music. It really is. It's really spooky. I love it. It's tons of fun. Play it at Halloween. Number 4 exists in 2 versions. It's based on his ballet music from The Prodigal Son, I think, and Shu, the buffoon, and things like that. And the ballet, it's very balletic. Symphonically, people argue it's not terribly well structured. It's beautiful music. The second version of it is for bigger orchestra. It's bigger and longer. A lot of people prefer the first because it's shorter and more concise. You can pick either one. The 5th is one of his great masterpieces. It's his most popular symphony after number 1. The 6th is also a masterpiece, but it's a tougher nut to crack than the 5th Symphony. It's in 3 movements with a big, long middle movement that's very, very interesting and emotionally ambivalent, but it's a tremendous piece of music. And the 7th is tuneful and enjoyable. It goes back to his ballet style. It has 2 endings, a loud ending and a soft ending. And so you get to listen and pick which one. But Prokofiev is a major guy. Next, back to the UK, Malcolm Arnold. Malcolm Arnold was known for his film music to The Bridge on the River Kwai, that fabulous movie, but he didn't write the march. The Colonel Bogey March is by Alford. The one, da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da. No, that's not by Malcolm Arnold. But the rest of the score he was a wonderful symphonist. He wrote 9 symphonies, and they are major works and fun to listen to and colorfully scored and very melodic until you get to the last couple, when he had a terrible life. He was bipolar and had all kinds of issues and suicide attempts and whatnot. And the 9th Symphony is really bleak and desolate. And it's something that you may want to slowly work your way into. But to get up to that point really isn't too difficult. And I think he's a major symphonist who also has not gotten his due. But start with the 5th Symphony. It's amazing. It's just fabulous. The 2nd is great. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Amazing works. They really are. So that's Malcolm Arnold. Next, the Danish composer Carl Nielsen. He's another composer who began in the 19th century, but very quickly flipped Well, the years quickly flipped because, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of his symphonies were all written in the 20th century. And I think they all were anyway. Yeah, I'm sure they were. And they are wonderful works. He was a composer in the Beethoven style, rugged, rhythmic, full of struggle and turmoil, leading to, usually, a blazingly affirmative conclusion. He was one of the few composers who could write a first movement that begins at full force. The Romantic period, they were equivocators. They like to write introductions to everything. It's a slow introduction, set the mood, have atmosphere, do all that stuff. Never start with just a bang and off we go like a rocket. Well, that was Nielsen. Really an amazing composer. His last symphony, however, the Sinfonia Semplice, is humorous and grotesque and saturated with a sort of, on the one hand, a painful knowledge of his own. He had a heart disease. He had angina, his own mortality, while at the same time sort of thumbing his nose at the whole thing. It's an extraordinary piece of music, but his 6 symphonies are magnificent. Next, back to the USA, Don Gillis. Who is Don Gillis? Don Gillis is one of the great American symphonists, period. He wrote at least 10 and a half symphonies. There may be more. I'm not quite sure what the actual number is. They've all been recorded on the Albany label, and some of them elsewhere. He's famous for writing symphony number 5.5, a symphony for fun, as he called it. It's a short little piece. It's hilariously funny. He wrote all of his symphonies have humorous subtexts somewhere in them. I mean, he was from Texas. I don't know what else to tell you. His music is recognizably, distinctively American, full of pop music sort of idioms, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. He was totally sincere and homespun in his Americanisms, and he ran the NBC Symphony and for Toscanini, who premiered some of his works. So he was known in the 40s and 50s of that time, and then completely forgotten, absolutely wrongly, typically for American symphonists, because we don't pay any attention to them. I mean, even the recordings of his symphonies for Albany were made in like Poland. It's so awful how American classical music composers get treated here in America, even the listenable, nice ones. So Don Gillis is someone to discover. Trust me, you're going to have fun. And I think part of the fun of doing these things, especially if you're getting started, isn't just going for the big names. It's listening to some of these lesser-known people and going on your own journey, seeing if you like it and then following your own interest and your own ideas. And I want to give you the opportunity to do a little of that with some of these lesser-known names. So after Don Gillis, Bohuslav Martinu, the great Czech symphonist after Dvorak. Martinu wrote 6 symphonies, all in the United States, all from about the period of after World War II. They are beautiful works, wonderful, lively. They're full of syncopated rhythms and luminous orchestral textures and a lot of busyness. A lot of sort of twitchy busyness going on with piano and harp and all those instruments and wonderful Czech folk-like tunes mixing with spacey, impressionistic harmonies. They're really, really, really distinctive. Extraordinary pieces. After Martinu, back to the UK. The UK had its symphonic flowering in the 20th century. It really did. I mean, there were virtually no British symphonies anyone cares about until Elgar wrote his, and they were all in the 20th century. So Vaughan Williams, the major British 20th century symphonist, gorgeous, gorgeous works, most of which end quietly, which is why they don't get played so much. And they run the gamut. There is the opening. The first one is the Sea Symphony on text by Walt Whitman, a big choral phantasmagoria. Then you get his London Symphony, number 2, which is full of folky modal melodies. It's just lovely. The Pastoral Symphony is number 3, which is the thing that turned me on to his music. Absolutely haunting. Fascinating how he builds so much power and power and tension into music that's mostly slow and quiet. But it's astonishing, incredible. Number 4 is a wartime work. It's vicious and nasty, or between the wartime work, whatever. It's vicious and nasty. It's like Godzilla Eats London. It's just marvelous. 5 is just the opposite. It's serene and spiritual. It's based on some music from his opera, The Pilgrim's Progress. 6 goes back to number 4. It's another turbulent and violent work with a spaced out apocalyptic wasteland finale. Number 7 is based on film music, the Sinfonia Antarctica, which is really cool. I mean, it's got whales and penguins and glaciers and wind machines and moaning choruses, and it's just nifty. Number 8 is a short, almost neoclassical piece with lots of exotic orchestration, tuned gongs and mallet instruments and all that stuff. And number 9 is a little spacey. It's a very late work. It's interesting how composers, when they get to these late pieces and they confront their own mortality, can write music of great ethereal spaciness. And the 9th is partly that way. It has a very sardonic scherzo. It continues his pursuit of interesting orchestral colors. It has 3 saxophones in it. I mean, it's really, really quite something. So Vaughan Williams is a major guy. Next, one of the ultimate major symphonists that ever existed, Sibelius. Yes, Sibelius's first symphony was composed in 1899, and all the rest are 20th century pieces, although he was done by the late 1920s. So they all popped up in basically a 2-decade-long, 30-year period, reasonably speaking, a 30-year period, and they need no introduction from me. Sibelius is major, but the interesting thing about his symphonies, there are 7 numbered ones, is that he really wrote 9. The first is a choral symphony, Kullervo, which is just fabulous for male chorus, 2 soloists, and big orchestra. A very early work that he never revised or revived, but it's a masterpiece. His first, great Finnish legend, Kalevala, mythology type work. And it's great. And it's become quite popular in recent days with lots and lots of recordings. So that's his first symphony. And his second, which got disintegrated, but really is his second, was the Lemminkainen Legends. And you know some of them, you may, because the Swan of Tuonela, one of his most popular tone poems, is one of those. And the Lemminkainen Legends are 4 tone poems which actually make a symphony. I mean, the first one, Lemminkainen and the Maidens of Sari, it's in perfect sonata form. I mean, it's sonata form. It's a symphonic movement. And then you get either the Swan of Tuonela or Lemminkainen in Tuonela, because he wasn't sure how the inner movements ought to go. 2 other tone poems, both of which take place in the Finnish realm of the dead. Ooh. Yes. Gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. And then finally, Lemminkainen's Return, which is just full of hustle and bustle and motion and excitement and fabulous tunes, and it's just amazing. And it really is a symphony. And Sibelius himself, when you put all 4 of them together, Sibelius himself always said, he had 7 numbered symphonies, but he really wrote 9. And I go with the 9. I really do, because I think he deserves credit for being a symphonist on a much broader canvas than he's usually given credit for being. So if you're going to do Sibelius, you should know straight out that there are 7 numbered symphonies, but there's lots else besides. And, your exploration of him is just beginning if you only do the 7 numbered symphonies. You should also do the Lemminkainen Legends, and you should do Kullervo, and, of course, everything else he wrote, because it's terrific. Finally, last but not least, how could we not do 20th century symphonies in clumps without one of the biggest and most fabulous clumps of all, Shostakovich. Shostakovich probably gets my vote for most important 20th century symphonist after Mahler in terms of what the general sense of what symphonies are supposed to be. Big, serious works that grapple with major issues. Now, not all of his symphonies are equally strong. Number 1 is a youthful sort of work of genius that everybody took on. I mean, Toscanini did it, Bruno Walter did it, all the early conductors did it. It made his reputation. Numbers 2 and 3 are experimental socialist realist pieces with really ridiculous choruses about, the joy of industrialization and whatnot. At the end, they're short. Nobody really cares for them very much, and it doesn't really matter. Number 4 is his most forward-looking symphony in many respects. It was taken off the boards when his opera Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk was panned by Stalin to basically save his life. He withdrew the Fourth Symphony. It wasn't performed. He wrote it in the 30s. It wasn't performed until the 60s. It's a rugged, modernist behemoth in three big movements, and it's really fun to listen to. But maybe after you get to know some of his other works. After that, his style changed because he was under horrible pressure from the regime to be more accessible. And so he made his music more accessible without compromising his either his technique or his ability or his symphonic bona fides, or, I mean, if anything, his music became even more expressive, more tragic, deeper, darker. And that began with the Fifth Symphony, his most popular symphony. But these middle ones, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the Leningrad Symphony, 8, 9, 10, those are the core of his symphonies, numbers 4 through 10. And they are magnificent works, absolutely extraordinary works. The 10th is often regarded as his greatest. Number 11 is another socialist realist piece based on the year 1905, the Palace Revolution and the massacre of the Palace Square. And it's like a film score without a film, kind of repetitious, but it has amazingly intense moments. Number 12 is widely regarded as his worst. I don't think that's necessarily true, at least until you get to the finale. He was under awful pressure, again, to write a big, triumphant choral symphony praising Lenin and Stalin and the regime, and he couldn't do it. So he wrote a noisy bit of sort of socialist realist fluff for number 12. But the first couple of movements are really, really exciting and worth hearing. And after that, you make up your own mind. 13 is a flat-out masterpiece. It's subtitled Babi Yar. It's a choral symphony based on poems by Yevtushenko about anti-Semitism in Russia, about the attempt to assassinate humor, because totalitarian regimes are not known for their sense of humor, and they're afraid of humor. They're afraid of being laughed at. And then At the Store, and then Fears, and finally A Career. One of the most moving pieces of music you've ever heard in your life. Absolutely riveting from first note to last. Number 14 is grim. It's a vocal symphony, sort of take on Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. It's 11 poems about death. Yeah, not for the faint of heart at all, but really, again, gripping and creepy. 15 is purely instrumental. It begins with a toy shop, as Shostakovich described it, with bits of the William Tell Overture, and there are quotations from Wagner's Ring and other things all over the place. It's it's another one of those composers near death looking into the great beyond pieces. The end particularly, it's just a ticking clock, just staring off into infinity. An extraordinary piece of music. Shostakovich's symphonies, the good ones and the less good ones, are wonderful when taken as a clump. When you look at his work whole and you realize that, he was, nobody's perfect. His imperfections are there, but somehow the great ones seem greater when the less great ones are there too, just to prove that he was human. And there's that sense of striving always for some kind of musical truth and beauty that's just there over the horizon. Really amazing stuff. So there you have it, my friends. 12 essential 20th century symphony clumps, symphony cycles for you to keep yourself busy for God the rest of your life. Who are we kidding? So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.